During the silent age and well into the sound era, comedies were a way that audiences could escape for a little while and have a good laugh. At the time of the Great Depression, these films were needed that much more. Two of the best comedians to really give audiences something to laugh and feel good about were the comedy duo of Laurel and Hardy. These two would keep slapstick comedy alive for many years and become beloved celebrities all around the world. With this video, I want to take a look into their lives and see what made them so popular. Before this video begins, I would like to ask everyone watching to please like, share, and subscribe. Also, be sure to check out the show's Patreon page to help us put out more of these videos. Now without further ado, I'm Big Rob, and this is a look into the comedy duo of Laurel and Hardy. Enjoy. Stan Laurel was born Arthur Stanley Jefferson in Ulverston, Lancashire, England on June 16, 1890. Stan had a lot to live up to as he was born into a theatrical family. Growing up, he perfected the skill of pantomime and adopted certain characteristics that would become trademarks of his, such as wearing a bowler hat. This helped when he joined Fred Karno's troupe of actors, which included a young Charlie Chaplin. For a while, Stan worked as Chaplin's understudy and toured the country with the troupe, perfecting his craft. Oliver Hardy was born Norvell Hardy in Harlem, Georgia on January 18, 1892. Very early in life, Oliver became interested in both music and theater, which kept him out of trouble as he was considered a difficult child. After seeing his talent as a singer, his mother paid for him to have singing lessons, though he would skip some classes to sing at the Alcazar Theater. When Oliver arrived in Hollywood, he mostly worked as a freelancer playing in one-reel films. Interestingly, Oliver would have a chance encounter in 1921 with the man who would become his on-screen partner and off-screen best friend. In 1921, Oliver Hardy would appear in the film The Lucky Dog, which was produced by Bronco Billy Anderson, one of the three top cowboy actors of the silent era. This film is notable for also starring Stan Laurel, whom would form a team with Hardy years later. Following the film, the two would not meet again until they began working at Hal Roach Studios in the latter part of the decade. In 1927, the duo began to appear in more films together, such as Slipping Wives, as well as With Love and Hisses. Seeing their great chemistry together, Leo McCarey, who was a supervising director at Roach Studios, began to pair them up more, and the duo of Laurel and Hardy was born. Laurel and Hardy began starring in a large number of short comedies, such as The Battle of the Century, Should Married Men Go to Home, Two Tars, Unaccustomed as We Are, and Another Fine Mess. Their first feature-length film was Pardon Us, which proved that the duo could carry a longer movie. This, however, did not stop their short films, because their short film, The Music Box, would win the Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Subject. As their stock continued to rise in Hollywood, the tensions between Laurel and Hal Roach began to rise as well. Hal Roach understood the value in the duo of Laurel and Hardy, but he had signed them to separate contracts as opposed to a dual contract. He also butted heads constantly with Laurel, who consistently wanted to write the screenplays his way. His faith in himself was not misplaced, as Laurel and Hardy's 1934 film Babes in Toyland continues to be a traditional holiday film to this very day. Hal Roach, on the other hand, hated the film and spoke publicly about his disdain for it. While he did not want to produce any more Laurel and Hardy films, the duo would remain with Roach for 6 more years. During this time, one of their most famous films was brought to the screen. In 1937, the duo would star in Way Out West, also starring actress Rosina Lawrence, and featuring the singing quartet, the Avalon Boys. The film features Laurel and Hardy hired and tasked with bringing the deed to a gold mine to an old prospector's daughter played by Lawrence. There are plenty of gags and heartfelt moments that keep the audience entertained. The film also features Laurel and Hardy's combination of music and comedy genius. The routines we're about to show you feature singing and dancing that may seem simple, but the way the duo go about it makes it comedy gold. Enjoy. Following the success of Way Out West, the contractual dispute between Laurel and Hal Roach caused Hardy to have to make a film without his partner. To temporarily rectify this, Hardy was paired with comedian Harry Langdon for the film Zenobia. The film, to put it simply, was a box office disaster. Following this, Laurel and Roach seemed to settle their dispute, but it wouldn't be long before the duo would leave Hal Roach, as they knew that another blow-up was inevitable. In 1941, Laurel and Hardy signed with 20th Century Fox, but were only hired as actors, which meant that they could not contribute to staging, writing, or editing, the very things that made their previous films so successful. To overcome this, the duo made sure that their films Great Guns and A Haunting We Will Go were big hits, which they were. The studio granted the two more artistic control afterwards, which really helped them. They would also sign with MGM to make a couple of features. Things seemed to be going very well, but that all started to change during the second half of the 1940s. In 1947, Laurel and Hardy would begin touring the UK. Things started out very well as they were greeted by fans at every place they went and would perform in places that had royal figures in attendance. While on tour, Laurel discovered that he had diabetes and encouraged Hardy to do some solo projects while he attended to his condition. Hardy agreed and took part in both John Wayne and Bing Crosby films. The 1950s would prove to be the last decade of Laurel and Hardy. In 1950, the duo signed on to do a feature film called Atoll K. This would not only prove to be their final film, but arguably their worst. According to Laurel's wife Ida, and I quote, "I'm hardly likely to forget the date we left for France and the date we returned, April 1st, 1950 and April 1st, 1951. But there was no April fooling about that terrible year. That bloody picture was supposed to take 12 weeks to make, and it took 12 months, unquote." The film was rife with many issues apart from the overextended schedule, such as disagreements on the screenplay between the duo and the screenwriters, who didn't seem to understand the comedy style of Laurel and Hardy. There was also a language barrier, as Laurel and Hardy did not speak French, and director Leo Johannin spoke very little English. Health issues also began to play a major factor, as Laurel dropped a considerable amount of weight due to his diabetes being re-aggravated from the different shooting locations and had to be hospitalized at one point. Hardy, on the other hand, saw his weight dramatically increase to over 330 pounds, which would contribute to heart problems down the road. Next were the issues with the director himself. Language barriers aside, Leo Johannin seemed very focused on the visual aspect of a film rather than the comedy of Laurel and Hardy. Laurel's wife Ida even claimed that Johannin spent 3 days simply filming a lake because he thought, and I quote, "it was the most photogenic lake he'd ever seen," unquote. The next issue that came about was U.S. director John Barry being brought in to work with them. However, Barry had to be secretly brought in as his career had been ruined by the Hollywood blacklist, which caused him to receive no on-screen credit as the director feared they would not get a U.S. release. Finally, 4 different versions of Atoll K were filmed, which was highly unusual. While the versions were different from each other, they all shared one thing in common. Each version was poorly received when released. As I mentioned earlier, this was the last film featuring Laurel and Hardy. Following the disaster of Atoll K, the duo decided to tour the UK again in music halls and theaters, given the success of their previous tour. They also tried to get another film called Robin Hood made, but it fell through, as film audiences had moved on to new comedy duos such as Abbott and Costello and the duo of Martin and Lewis. This tour would become synonymous as the tour that ended the careers of both men. This was due to Hardy suffering a heart attack during the tour, which saw it end prematurely. I discovered something very interesting when I researched their careers. It seems that at their peak, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy rarely spent any time together. Laurel had spent much of his time writing or rewriting scripts, coming up with gags and assisting in the editing. Hardy, on the other hand, spent much of his time gambling, an addiction that would plague him financially in addition to his divorces. Laurel had also suffered from divorces, and by the time of their final UK tour, the tour itself had become Laurel and Hardy's main source of income. This was because they had not received any residuals from Hal Roach, as his contracts prevented the duo from receiving any. The tour in the UK really saw Laurel and Hardy get to know each other for the first time. Despite some bumps here and there, they realized just how much they cared for each other. Laurel always called Hardy by his nickname Babe, and little things like this showed the love and respect they had for one another, and it made their final tour successful even if it was cut short. When they arrived back home in the US, Laurel would suffer a stroke but recover, and the two would even appear on television a couple of times together. They had planned on beginning their own television series when Hardy suffered a massive stroke and was forced to retire for good. His health would not improve, and unfortunately, he would die on August 7, 1957. Laurel was too ill to attend the funeral, but simply said, and I quote, "Babe would understand," unquote. Oliver Hardy's death was incredibly devastating to Stan Laurel, who immediately retired from performing, vowing to never again perform without his best friend. Having never fully recovered from the impact of Hardy's death, Laurel would cope by continuing to write Laurel and Hardy material until he passed away on February 23, 1965. It's touching to know that Stan Laurel kept his promise and stayed loyal to Oliver Hardy by never performing for anyone ever again. While his fans may have been disappointed, Laurel would speak to them over the phone as his number was listed in the phone book. Whenever someone would call, he would have a nice conversation with them. 4 years before his death, Laurel would accept an Academy Honorary Award for Lifetime Achievement. While the award may have been bittersweet without Hardy, I'm sure that he was with Laurel in spirit and that his partner and brother knew that. Comedian Jerry Lewis around this time even offered Laurel a role in his 1960 film The Bellboy. However, staying true to his promise, Laurel politely declined. Lewis understood and still paid tribute to his friend by naming his main character in the film Stanley, and having actor Bill Richmond play a version of Laurel as well. The comedy genius of Laurel and Hardy was at times overshadowed by the more animated duo of Abbott and Costello. However, the 2018 film Stan and Ollie showcased the duo's brilliance for a whole new generation of moviegoers. The film features actors Steve Coogan and John C. Reilly playing Laurel and Hardy respectively, and the two seem tailor-made for their roles. They perform the classic duo to perfection, with Coogan even being nominated for a BAFTA award for his performance. I highly recommend this film to anyone. To further cement my appreciation for it, I'll show you all the trailer to this great film. Enjoy.
Camera set. Okay, back projection. Cue music. And action!
Hollywood legends Mr. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy arrived in Britain today as they embarked on a national tour.
We're doing this while we're waiting for this new picture to come together.
I'm gonna make sure that this tour gets off on the right foot.
There it is, the Eiffel Tower.
It's amazing that you two are still going strong. Still using the same old material.
Here they are.
Such a wonderful reception, isn't it, Ida?
It's okay.
2 double acts for the price of 1.
Pretty empty last night. I guess people just don't want to see Laurel and Hardy anymore.
Has he been pushing you a little too hard, babe?
You know, Stan.
You could have said goodbye, Oliver, a long time ago.
We had a good thing going, but you had this big chip on your shoulder because I did a picture with someone else.
I couldn't sleep for days when they told me what you did. You're just a lazy ass who got lucky because you met me.
Lucky to spend my life with a man who hides behind his typewriter.
You betrayed me. Betrayed our friendship.
You're hollow.
You cannot go on stage again in your condition.
I love you, but I won't stand by and watch this nutty tour put you in a wooden box.
I should never have had us take this tour. I love him, Ida.
You're not leaving, are you, Stan? The show must go on.
When you watch our movies, it was just the two of us. All we had was each other.
Je ne regrette rien. And you shouldn't regret rien either.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stan Laurel and Mr. Oliver Hardy.
I'll miss us when we're gone. So will you.
I hope you all enjoyed this look into the lives of two legendary comedians whose work continues to entertain and make audiences laugh to this day. I would love to read what all of you think about them in the comments section below. Remember to hit the subscribe button and click the bell to stay notified of new videos. Also remember to like and share the videos and to become a patron on Patreon. My partner and good friend Joe Lewis does an amazing job editing these videos, so let's give him some love. In a way, we're both keeping the tradition of Laurel and Hardy alive, as in we're two guys working hard to provide quality entertainment. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you again soon.